Victoria Beckham has spoken for the first time of the pain she suffered in the aftermath of the claims about her husband David's alleged affair with Rebecca Luce. Almost 20 years after it was claimed he and the personal assistant had become close while he was playing in Spain for Real Madrid. Mrs. Beckham revealed that the months afterwards were the hardest of her life, and that she no longer felt like the couple had each other. Meanwhile, Beckham admitted he still doesn't know how they got through the 2003 crisis, but he and his former Spice Girl wife knew they had to fight for their family, and said they felt like they were drowning when their high-profile marriage was in the headlines for months. The former England captain also told how he felt physically sick every day, as he and Mrs. Beckham faced a battle to save their marriage. The couple attended the London premiere of a 4-part Netflix documentary, titled Beckham, which spans his life from his childhood through to his latest role as co-owner of Us Side Inter Miami. Beckham and his designer wife, who was wearing a white trouser suit from her own label, were joined by their 4 children Brooklyn, Romeo, Cruz, and Harper, as well as Brooklyn's actress wife Nicola Peltz and Romeo's model girlfriend, Mia Reagan. Celebrities on the guest list included James Corden, Tana Ramsey, Gary Neville, Alexa Chung, and Steve Bruce, and afterwards Beckham threw a lavish party at the 22 Club in Mayfair. It all seemed a million miles away from the difficult days in Madrid, which friends of the couple say they decided to speak about because they wanted to appear authentic. They also no longer feel they have anything to prove. In a searingly honest interview in the 4th and final episode, Mrs. Beckham, 49, appeared to fight back tears as she was asked if it was the hardest time in their marriage. 100%, she confessed. It was the hardest period for us, because it felt like the world was against us. Here's the thing. We were against each other, if I'm being completely honest. Up until Madrid, sometimes it felt like us against everybody else, but we were together. We were connected. We had each other. But when we were in Spain, it didn't really feel like we had each other either. And that's sad. I can't even begin to tell you how hard it was, and how it affected me. Beckham, 48, stunned the world when his alleged relationship with Luce were revealed in the now-defunct News of the World newspaper. At the time, Mrs. Beckham had decided to remain in the UK, so that her young sons Brooklyn and Romeo could stay in their schools. The decision left Beckham lonely, and he admits that he struggled. He said, "When I first moved to Spain, it was difficult because I had been part of a club and a family for my whole career, from the age of 15 to when I was 27. I get sold overnight. The next minute I'm in a city. I don't speak the language. More importantly, I didn't have my family. Every time that we woke up, we felt there was something else. We both felt at the time that we were not losing each other, but drowning." Asked how their marriage survived, Beckham told how he feared playing football while his wife struggled to find a way through their crisis. Shaking his head, he said, "I don't know how we got through it, in all honesty. Victoria is everything to me. To see her hurt was incredibly difficult, but we're fighters, and at that time we needed to fight for each other. We needed to fight for our family. And what we had was worth fighting for. There were some days that I would wake up and think, how am I going to go to work? How am I going to walk onto that training pitch? How am I going to look as if nothing's wrong? I felt physically sick every day when I opened my eyes. How am I going to do this?" The crisis prompted Mrs. Beckham to relocate to Madrid, where they bought a 3-pound Lane home, which she says she decorated herself. She later went on to have the couple's 3rd son, Cruz, now 18, in the Spanish capital. Despite creating a base for her family in Madrid, she admits she was not happy with leaving the UK. She said, "As soon as I could get the kids in school, we then moved full-time. Did I resent David? If I am being totally honest, yes, I did. It was probably, if I'm being honest, the most unhappy I have ever been in my life. It wasn't that I felt unheard because I chose to internalize a lot of it, because I was always mindful of a focus that he needed." Mrs. Beckham described their time in Madrid as a nightmare and an absolute circuses, while Beckham said the school run was live on Spanish TV. The couple say the documentary, which features never-before-heard anecdotes from Beckham's parents Ted and Sandra, Sir Alex Ferguson, Gary Neville, and Beckham's best friend Dave Gardner, was like therapy for them. Mrs. Beckham tells of her relief at moving to Los Angeles, where Beckham played for LA Galaxy, admitting she felt at peace. I was so relieved to be going from such a tricky situation in Spain. It was a place where everything was just so much easier. Easier to find a house, easier to find a school. You don't have a language barrier. And so for me, it was all my dreams come true. LA was a great place to live. I've got my family together, and I let go of a lot of pain. Remember someone saying to me once that LA is like rehab for famous people. That's why we always see people walking in Malibu in Ugg boots and tracksuits. The schools were great. I definitely felt at peace. Finally, we seemed settled. Mrs. Beckham, however, did share her fury at her husband's decision to temporarily leave the L. Aside to play for AC Milan in Italy so he could get into the England team again, after an ultimatum from manager Fabio Capello. She said of when he told her, "What do you mean, you want to go to Milan? We've just moved from one side of the world to the other for you." What I signed up for was us being in LA as a family, so I didn't expect to turn up in LA, have everything perfect, and then he go, "Oh, guess what, surprise. I'm going away again." I respected his career, I always have done immensely, but not again. I was really upset. The finale of the series sees the couple dancing to Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers' hit Islands in the Stream at their converted barn in Oxfordshire. All 4 of their children, including daughter Harper, 12, feature in the scenes, as well as Brooklyn's wife, Nicola Peltz. Speaking of their lives as they approach their 25th wedding anniversary next July, Mrs. Beckham says, "I feel happy now. I feel really content now." There's an element of you're passing the baton on a little. And you want that for your kids, wouldn't you say? To which Beckham replies, "Yeah, I'm not ready to pass the baton on yet." Speaking of their children, Beckham says it is difficult for them to be normal when their dad is a former England captain and their mum an ex-Spice Girl. He says, "They could be little, but they're not." David Beckham choked back tears as he spoke candidly about his life and career in a new Netflix docuseries that reflects on his 3 decades in the spotlight. The sportsman, 48, burst into the limelight at the tender age of 17 as Manchester United's budding new midfielder, quickly earning himself the reputation as football's golden boy and one of the most talented players of his generation. Yet his career threatened to be derailed when he was blamed for England's World Cup 1998 exit after lashing out at Diego Simeone, sparking a lengthy campaign of hate and abuse from fans. Reflecting on the turbulent period, which David faced at the age of just 23, the athlete confessed he was a mess and left unable to eat or sleep, with his wife Victoria, 49. Revealing he suffered from clinical depression and the experience broke him. David recalled feeling very vulnerable and alone as he landed back in the UK to hordes of jeering spectators and negative press, with his father Ted admitting David was distraught when he met him, saying the young sports star fell into my arms and said, "I've left everybody." The night before the World Cup game, David had learnt that Victoria was pregnant with their first T-child, and after touching down in England to see his parents, he wasted no time jetting off to New York to spend time with his expectant fiancée, who was touring the States with the Spice Girls. Victoria confessed, "I remember not really understanding how serious it was because I've never really been into football. When he came to me in America, he felt he let himself down. He let his teammates down. He let his country down. He let the fans down. He felt he let everybody down. But when he was with us Spice Girls, there was protection. People couldn't get to us. We could put a cotton wool around us." I don't think either of us really realized what was going on in the UK. He went from having that protection into absolute carnage. Growing emotional as he reflected on the backlash he received, David confessed, "I don't think I've ever talked about it because I can't. I find it hard to talk about what I went through because it was so extreme. The whole country hated me." Detailing the horrific abuse, which became so bad that he was unable to visit the toilet unattended for fear of being attacked on the way, David continued, "Wherever I went, I got abused every day. To walk down the street and see people look at you a certain way, spit at you, abuse you, come up to your face and say some of the things that they said, that's difficult. I wasn't eating, I wasn't sleeping, I was a mess." David, who received death threats and had effigies made in his likeness, went on to detail the impact it had on his parents, Ted and Sandra, noting, It brought a lot of attention that I would never wish on anyone, let alone my parents, and I can't forgive myself for that. That's the tough part that happened then. I'm 47 years old now, and I beat myself up about it still. Inside, it killed me. As David's teammate Phil Neville spoke out about the inhumane way David was treated by the nation, Victoria remarked, "He was really depressed, clinically depressed. It pained me so much. I still want to kill these people." Victoria also took aim at the 1998 World Cup manager Glenn Hoddle. Seething. He didn't come out and try to protect David. And how old was David? 23. You're a kid at 23, and Glenn Hoddle was a man. Well, I wouldn't even call him a man, actually. He was an older person. I mean, the absolute hate, public bullying. Thankfully, David was able to redeem himself when he took on Diego once again at the Manchester United vs Inter Milan Champions League quarter-final in 1999. Yet while all eyes were on David and his grudge match with the Argentinian player, Dave confessed his thoughts were consumed by the fact Victoria could welcome their first child at any day, because she was already 2 weeks over her due date when the match occurred. It caused tension between the pair, with teammate Gary Neville recalling hearing the pair bicker over the phone. They were at each other, he was distracted, Gary noted. Victoria was saying, "If you're not here, if you miss this birth, if you're not back." And I went, "Turn your phone off, you'll be melted by the time we get to the game tonight." After a rocky start to the game, David was able to find solace in the crowd chanting his name, helping Manchester United spur on to a 2-0 victory. He was able to make it back in time for the birth of his first child, and was by Victoria's side for her cesarean section, with Victoria quick to clear up. "I wasn't too posh to push. I was told it would not be safe for me to be put into labor." The couple welcomed son Brooklyn on March 4, 1999 at Portland Hospital in London, with David calling fatherhood the most amazing thing. Yet even the prospect of welcoming his first child wasn't enough to stop him from thinking about his image, with Victoria recalling that when she was in labor and lying in bed numb from the waist down due to an epidural. The footballer had cheekily asked if she could style his hair. Upon becoming a father, though, his priorities shifted, with David recalling, "I all of a sudden thought, how am I going to protect him?" That night Brooklyn slept next to Victoria. She said, "Come sleep on the bed with me." And I said, "Absolutely not." I slept with my head facing the door, because I was paranoid someone was going to steal him. It's meant to be a happy moment, and it was a happy moment, of course. But I was worried. I didn't want him to come into this life at a time when I was going through what I was going through. Voicing her fears for her young son, Victoria revealed, "We were getting kidnapping threats right from when we had Brooklyn, and you can't even explain how that feels because we couldn't hide." These are all things that are now coming back to me, and I find it quite stressful now because I've blocked so much of it out, and I think David has as well. Imagine having a baby and having death threats. David had to play knowing this was all going on, and I was on my own in an apartment with a baby. I'd go to the games with Brooklyn, and the abuse it's hard to explain. I remember sitting down, and the lady next to me turned, and she didn't know what to say. She said, "Do you want a polo?" Because what do you say when you sit next to someone and 75,000 people have been saying you take it up the... We did not know what to do. It felt like we were drowning. Ironically, it was the abuse aimed at his family that spurred David on, with the footballer improving his track record. The couple refused to let any vile remarks get in the way of celebrating their love for one another, with the couple tying the knot on July 4, 1999, at Luttrellstown Castle in Ireland, with OK magazine paying £1 lion for the photography rights. David shared clips from his big day in the docuseries, laughing at his decision to make their guests wear black and white while he and Victoria donned garish purple ensembles. As Gary described the wedding as a spectacle, David mused, "I try to think back to when I decided to wear a purple suit, and I don't know when that happened. I think I just took Victoria's lead on it, but what were we thinking?" Having no regrets on her end, Victoria quipped, "It was fun. We weren't worried about what people were going to say. I mean, Christ, how lovely to be that way when you just don't really care, you just want to express yourselves." But she did confess, "I don't know where the thrones came from." while referring to the gold chairs she and David posed on. Fans were also given a glimpse at his best man Gary Neville's very rude wedding speech when he made reference to the Spice Girls' sex life. He joked, "David said the Spice Girls requested the Bayern Munich team be present today, and David was puzzled at this request and asked why." The Spice Girls replied that they'd like to meet any men who could stay on top for 90 minutes and still come second. David Beckham was addicted to wife Victoria when they first started dating, with his worried mother Sandra forced to try and intervene. Reflecting on the couple's love story in the new Netflix documentary, Beckham, the footballer's friends and loved ones recalled their shock at the extreme lengths the Manchester United player would go to in order to spend time with her. The pair's intense and conflicting schedule, with David at football training in Manchester and Victoria touring the world with the Spice Girls, meant that they rarely had any free time together. Yet David didn't let it stop him from doing all he could to meet up during their early courtship in 1997, with the sportsman, 48, confessing, "I didn't care when I saw her how much I saw her. If it was me driving down to London to see her for 7 minutes, I did it." He added, "Everything about Victoria, I loved. I didn't know she was the strong woman that she was, and I like that. I don't whether it was because I wanted her to look after me. She's a strong, strong woman. She can be a pain in the though." Victoria, 49, was left smitten by his grand gestures, recalling, "I was on tour, but not knowing when I was going to see him was the difficult thing. He would do anything to just try and spend time with me. He would sometimes charter a tiny plane, like a 2-seater plane. He would come over literally for a few hours, then go back." Yet while the pair only had eyes for each other, those on the outside were concerned about the impact it was having on the footballer and his career. Fellow Manchester United player Gary Neville, 48, explained, "The lengths he was going to see Victoria, it was lot. He was like an addict. He would drive 4 hours to spend 20 minutes with her. He was on the phone to Victoria every second, and he would stay on the phone until 1 o'clock in the morning." David's mother Sandra, 74, was also concerned, revealing she intercepted calls between the pair in a bid to stop David becoming distracted. She recalled, "Victoria would be away and we'd be staying at David's house, and 3 o'clock in the morning the phone would ring. He had a game, so I'd answer the phone and say, 'He's in bed, asleep,' and they'd want to talk. But me being a protective mom thought, you shouldn't really be ringing this time in the morning." But how can you tell them? They're adults. I was worried he'd lose all he worked for because football come first, and all of a sudden it wasn't. David revealed the first time he ever laid eyes on Victoria was when he watched the Spice Girls' Wannabe music video, recalling, "I turned round to Gary and said, 'I'm going to marry that one, the posh one. The one in the black dray. SS.'" The pair's intense and conflicting schedule, with David at football training in Manchester and Victoria touring the world with the Spice Girls, meant that they rarely had any free time together. Their first meeting took place when Victoria and her bandmate Mel C attended a Manchester United game and were invited onto the pitch. Victoria confessed, "I am not into football at all. I wasn't into football then. I'm not into football now. But I'd seen pictures of him in magazines, and obviously he was a really good-looking boy. I went to the games to, some would say stalk him, I would say see him. When I saw him at the footballers' lounge, all the other footballers were at the bar, but he was standing talking to his parents. I'm very close to my family, and I loved that side to him." With both David and Victoria revealing they instantly fancied each other on their first meeting, David confessed, "There was something there straight away. I thought, okay, this is it, and it's gonna move fast." David and Victoria went on to become a brand, gaining lucrative contracts with clothing designers, health and fitness specialists, fashion magazines, and perfume and cosmetics manufacturers. The couple, who have 4 children, Brooklyn, 24, Romeo, 21, Cruz, 18, and Harper, 12, have accumulated an estimated net worth of £380. But at the start of their relationship, Victoria was told by her manager at the time to keep it under wraps. She confessed, "We would meet in car parks, and that's not as seedy as it sounds," as David admitted. "The first kiss that I ever had with Victoria was in my BMW in a car park, classy. For about 3 months we kept it quiet. Then I bought her a Cartier watch and she wore it then. All of a sudden, people were piecing it together. So you know, Posh and Bex. The couple became an instant pop culture phenomenon, with Gary describing the hype around the pair as the new Charles and Diana. David and Victoria even landed the cover of Vogue magazine, with editor Anna Wintour explaining, "I put them on the cover because my daughter was so obsessed with them, so I thought the world must be." When you have two equally charismatic people, it doubles the volume and puts the heat factor way up. Describing the fanfare around their relationship, Victoria went on, "David didn't have a lot of friends at school, and neither did I.